Today, I want to speak to us about how codes and standards affect what we do in energy management, programs, and initiatives. Now, some facts that you probably already know. The good thing about speaking to an audience like this is with learned people in the room, you can just move quickly through what you already have because you already know this stuff. But just a refresher, buildings account for about 1/3 of the world's total energy use and contribution to greenhouse gases. More than half of electricity produced is consumed by buildings. And typically, for the life cycle energy consumed by a building, you're looking at 10 to 20% of the total life cycle energy in the manufacture, the assembly, the construction, and the maintenance of the building. And 80 to 90% is used for heating, ventilation, cooling, lighting, and appliances, right? I'm sure you have discussed this many times during the course of the day. Right? But this is the focus of what we do when we are preparing the codes and standards to address these issues. So this slide is a precursor to what I'm going to speak on. The codes and standards is looking to address these issues. A little history of the building code. After the earthquake of 1907, is it 7 or 06? 1907, yes. And the fires that devastated Kingston, the earthquake and the resulting fires, there was a big outcry for us to have code of practice to protect our structures and save lives. So we had the KSAC building regulations that drafted in 08. KSAC being Kingston and St. Andrew, because that was the major area that was affected. So it wasn't for the entire country. It was based on the 1892 London building regs. Of course, that's the country that was in charge at the time. So naturally, we will go for the UK regulations. They were inflexible, restrictive, and had to be modified frequently. So although it was a good start, but there were some issues that needed to be addressed. And of course, it was only for the KSAC. In 1962, you remember what happened then? Well, I wasn't born then, but I heard that there was independence. So in 62, we revised the KSAC building regs. And we had the final draft regulations presented to Cabinet in 65. Unfortunately, the redraft stayed for quite a time, 9 years in limbo. And then in 74, just before my parents considered me, right? We had a major redraft of the 65 effort. In 81, the Prime Minister at the time commissioned a committee to revise the 74 regulation and expand it to the rest of the country. In the 90s, when Jamaica was looking to go metric, we decided that the National Building Code should also be metric. So we had a metrification of the code. Of course, because our major trading partner is the US, on paper, we are metric. Right? So, but the US, when they send products to Jamaica, they are using imperial units. So when we decided to have the update of the code, using American I codes, we had to have a dual system where we have both metric and imperial units in the code. I remember the Jamaica Institution of Engineers partnering with the Bureau of Standards in the early 2000s, embarked on a project to update the code. And we were looking at using the American I codes. I have a copy of the Energy Conservation Code here as our base documents. The I codes are reviewed often. So the idea was to peg the Jamaican building code to the cycle of the I codes. So as it is updated, we'll update our codes. Congratulations to the Bureau of Standards and the GIE. I remember in 2007, I made some comments on a cabinet submission for a bill to go to Parliament, to Cabinet, for a new building act for Jamaica. I was so excited. 2007, I think it was August 2007. And then in September, we had elections. So we are, what now, 2017. So you know I've been on this a little while, and we still don't have the act yet. But I have a dream, and I believe that this is a year. Yes, I'm seeing in the document that we have in our package, the policy document, that one of the aims is to have the act promulgated this year. Good. So somebody's talking. So I'll take any time in the year. Even if it is April next year, it doesn't matter. I'm waiting 10 years now. Right? Okay, I'm going to look on some of the principles of one of the key codes, the International Energy Conservation Code, and then mention some standards that relate to the built environment. Now, the codes that we have for Jamaica is in two parts. We have the American I codes. I call them I codes because America says they're international codes. You know, America's everything is world, even if they're doing it alone, right? So the international codes, right? There are a series of them. The IBC, which is the building code, residential code, IRC, fire, mechanical, fuel, gas, etc. So we adopted, not adopted. The O mean you change nothing about the child, right? But the adaptation means you look through and say, there are some things that apply, some things that do not apply. For instance, we exclude an entire chapter. I'll speak on it later. So you have the American I code, and you have a Jamaican application document that has to go in tandem with this code, which tells you which part of this document is applicable to Jamaica. I'm going to go through some of the principles contained. I'm not going to go into any technical details. So where is the key focus of the IECC? I'm speaking to the application document and the international code. So in terms of the scope, it speaks to all types of commercial, office, hotel, high-rise, residential, family residence. And the exception for this particular code would be industrial plants and special purpose buildings. There's one contention that we have been battling with for some years now. We believe as professionals, as engineers and architects, that there are some buildings that you cannot submit a plan for as a draftsman. It is outside of the training. Of course, there's been a practice in Jamaica that a lot of draftsmen do these informal, well, they consider them formal, designs and submit for approval by the building authority. When it comes to the International Code for Energy Conservation, we have different methods that reduces the likelihood of having a building that is not properly designed. I must hasten to mention that there's one code in the series called International Existing Building Code. That code speaks to buildings that are already erected before the passing of the Building Act that you can retrofit to be code compliant. So some of these principles will apply for retrofitting buildings. The application document is based on the IECC, ASHRAE's Advanced Energy Design Guide for Small Commercial and Residential Buildings, and the Jamaican Energy Efficiency Code of 1994. When we looked on that document from 94, we recognized that the work that went into it, for the most part, was still relevant to the country at this time. So one of the chapters that we have in the current code was replaced by the 94 Energy Efficiency Building Code. Now, our application document speaks about conditioned and unconditioned building. The American code only addresses conditioned buildings. We are in the tropics, right? Although I'm a minister of religion, I don't like the jacket thing, right? And I think we should design for our people, right? I don't hear anybody knocking on Mr. Speaker. I think we need to be practical, right? And the code speaks to designing not only for forced ventilation and conditioned space, but for unconditioned space, maximizing the use of natural light. The structure is in two parts. Part one speaks to the unconditioned buildings, and part two speaks to the conditioned buildings for residential, commercial, and high-rise residential. In terms of the principles for air conditioning system, as much as possible, the code seeks to give a design option that reduces the reliance on AC. For me, personally, my office has a room AC, but I have a window right beside my desk. If it is possible during the course of the day, I mean, around 10 o'clock, the sun hit me in my neck back. So at that time, I have to use the air conditioning system. But buildings moving forward must be designed in the country that you have that option, that duality. We're also looking at health considerations. So where there's high density occupancy or rooms that require frequent air changes to prevent the buildup of pathogens and viruses, germs, and bacteria, the code gives the option to reduce the reliance on air conditioning systems. The experts met and decided to break out the country into 3 climatic zones: Southern, Northern and Midlands, and Highlands. Those of us who born and grow in Kingston will know that our temperature change is not as significant. I was speaking to a group recently, and we say we have Christmas breeze. It's a term that Jamaicans will use because of the northerlies that come down around the Burr months. You know, the Burr months, right? October, November, December. Right? But based on climate change, the years have been getting hotter and hotter. Right? Last year, I don't remember any Christmas breeze till about the 20th. There are parts of the island that have different microclimates. So we divided the country into 3 climatic zones that help the designer in utilizing the local condition for forced ventilation and natural ventilation. There's a stratification. Again, we're practical. Right? It makes no sense imposing specification and requirements on persons who cannot afford it. So there's stratification in terms of low, middle, and upper income energy requirements. Now, for a long time, I thought I was middle class until I went to the NHD, and then I didn't feel so middle anymore. Right? So I don't know about upper, you know. So in terms of the determination, that is still left for some interpretation. But the code considers the availability of resources. So it's not too onerous on the designers. So the requirements increase as you move from low to upper, naturally. For unconditioned buildings, there's a prescriptive method. The Bureau of Standards over the years have tried to move away from prescriptive standards, where we tell you that you have to use 3 parts this, to 2 parts this, to 1 part that. And more to the performance, to say, you must build a chair that lasts 100 years. If you can use dirt, then that's up to you, as long as you can prove to us that you can meet the requirement. But for unconditioned buildings in the code, we know that this is not a skill set that is so prevalent, so we're giving the prescriptive method to designers. It gives the energy goals to be achieved, the strategies, and the practical steps. So it is almost a hand-holding. Some examples. Say for low-income options, the number one thing for most low-income options would have to do with lighting. Energy efficiency lighting, insulated roof, keeping direct radiation out of the building, maximizing cross ventilation, and openable window space of at least 10%. The middle income, all of the requirements for low income is applied, plus the additional use of glass with low solar heat gain. We assume that the lower income persons cannot afford the specialized windows and glasses. So middle income, like you, can add this, right? And upper income includes all the requirements for the low, for the middle, and have additional requirements for better lighting and power controls. Part 2, which speaks to conditioned buildings now. So we just dealt with the unconditioned buildings. Now we're on to the conditioned buildings. So there are 3 options here. These are residential. So you have residential condition and commercial condition. So let's deal with residential first. So we have these 3 options that a designer can choose to use for design of the structure. The code stipulates, and this would be enforced by the building authority, that the designer has to state which option he is using and why. And then it goes into the compliance evaluator, which is the building official, analyzing if the option chosen is in line with the code requirements. Obviously, the advanced prescriptive method gives the greatest energy saving, but there's a cost associated. So the option is given as long as you meet the minimum requirement. I spoke about this earlier. Chapter 7 in the IECC was taken out, not physically ripped out, and it's still there, right, was taken out, is excluded from the Jamaican application document. And what we did was to put in our energy efficiency code as the new Chapter 7. So if you're only using this, you will be deficient in your design. You need this and the application document to determine the design requirements. We did some minor changes. There are 3 proposed methods: the prescriptive, which is always there; the system performance requirements based on the output; and the more elaborate whole building analysis method. Some changes since the '94 edition of the code. The targeted values to be met have been included. The whole building analysis method of cost by energy consumption and energy cost budget included. And the effect of building energy consumption maximizing the use of daylight. The code also considers design requirements for the 5 areas of the building that typically will need attention if you're going to maximize the energy management initiatives that you have. So that's the code. In terms of some standards now that are applicable to the built environment, this one, the ISO 1001, looks at not just the design aspect, but the whole management system, including renewables, energy efficiency initiatives, and gives you a payback that ISO did a survey, and what they found is 9 out of 10 users of this standard, ISO 1001, it is a management system standard. 9 out of 10 users strongly recommended it. 95% of users said the standard helped them to identify that the activities that consume the most energy, the significant energy users. And significant energy users is not just the lights and the AC. Sometimes it's the people. Because you can have a lot of engineering interventions and then the people, right? So you put in the energy efficient lights and it is left on all night, all day, right? ISO also found, and ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. The BSJ is one organization in the group. Found that 89% of organizations that have put in place the management system and obtained certification were satisfied. So this is a huge way to impact your design and your activity, even if you are already in energy management. It's based on the plan, do, check, act cycle. So you plan, and I heard Earl quoting Einstein earlier, 55 minutes for defining a problem. Sometimes you fix the wrong thing. And you're wondering, how is it that my capital budget went up? I put in all of these initiatives and my return on investment is not as I planned. But proper planning is key. You do, that is implementing, you monitor and evaluate, you have your continual improvement, your management review, corrective action, and preventive action. The bottom line is that you get more money. So it provides strategies to increase efficiency and improve energy performance. And it's applicable to anything. Sharon Williams said many years ago, you can even have it in your bathroom. He was on the Apollo rocket, right? Right. So it can be applied to any area, any business, whatever size. And it meets the customer needs. So ISO 1001 is a very strong sell from the Bureau of Standards. Now, before I conclude, I want to inform you before the rest of Jamaica hears, right? JNN is here. The Bureau of Standards is a recipient of a World Bank-funded initiative through the Ministry of Energy, where we are increasing our potential, our capacity to test refrigerators, freezers, and for the very first time in the English-speaking Caribbean, room ACs. Now remember the slide I told you about the major consumption of energy. That's what we're targeting. Cooling is a major thing in Jamaica. So I'm hoping in another 8 weeks, we'll have a launch. And it will be a lab or sets of labs that will serve not Jamaica, but the Caribbean region. So you heard it right here, breaking news. And these are the standards that we'll be using in our testing. And I want to draw attention to this last one, JS1 Part 21, which is the energy labeling of appliances and products. What will happen when you go into, I won't call a name, a store that sells appliances, right? You know, them and them and, right? Instead of seeing the American Energy Star, you will be seeing a Jamaican energy label based on our local condition, right? So this is something that we'll be launching through the Ministry of Energy in a few weeks. Pardon me? The chambers are set that you can test at multiple frequencies. You can test at 50, test at 60. And the energy label will let you know what will be your estimated consumption for a year. So when you go to buy, you can say, okay, so my electricity bill on this fridge, given the rate that is going at now, JPS, would be about 20,000 on this fridge. And this one, about 15. So you can make an informed decision. Right?
Wouldn't it be safer to give the consumption rather than the dollar figure?
We're doing both because of the publics. You see, when someone who just went to primary school, didn't even go to university, well, high school, sees kilowatt hour, they have no idea. So they say, how much this cost? How much that cost? And gone. But when you put this big $20,000 per year, it stands out, right? So we will have to be vigilant in terms of making adjustment as the rate changes. Because this dollar figure will change based on the rate.